getting into this thing. So, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, St. Gertrude's Church was the original Catholic church in St. Clair Shores, and it's had many different names. It was destroyed by fire and by water and by a bulldozer and so forth. And we've gathered up a few photographs that we've had. And of course, Hank and his family have been with the church and the cemetery and the whole shot right from the beginning. So he's got some fascinating stories to tell. And perhaps if we can start with a photograph and then we can just go from there.
All right, you and Hank could describe these photographs then and tell us what we're going to show them here. Hank, it's always great to have you on the show to tell us a little bit about because if anybody knows the history of St. Clair Shores, Hank does.
Yeah, he doesn't forget anything.
Okay, here we go. Let's see this one now.
Yeah, that's the original. That's not the original church. There was one built just before that, and it burnt down.
When was that one? What's the age of this one? About what years?
Well, it was built in 1897, but that photograph was probably taken in the 50s.
Okay.
Yeah, 1897. It was built by a priest named Father Russell. I believe he was up in Sacred Heart, and he went from Sacred Heart to St. Clair Shores to say Mass. He'd probably say Mass at one Sunday at one place, one Sunday at another place. He was known as a cowboy.
Was that right?
This is for my father and mother and my uncle and my grandfather. And he built that church, and when it was just about finished, I believe, supposedly he took off with what money was left, and they never saw him again. That's brought down from my father and mother, and they told me that numerous times.
Here's another one here. What do we
They
got?
never did forgive him, did they?
No.
It's a cornerstone here. What is this?
Well, this is the cornerstone. These stones, I believe, are Lake Erie limestone, and they were hauled up here by one of our local lake captains, Captain Peltier, which everybody called him Pelkey. Mispronunciation of a good old French name. Hank, you could tell us about you and Cap having a few drinks together and what he told you about those stones.
Oh yeah, Cap is retired. He's now dead. He hauled all the stone up for this church from, I don't know, down around Toledo or somewhere in that area. And long before he died, and up till he's died, he used to get pretty well loaded. He would tell me, he called me Henry. He'd say, you know, they never paid me for that stone yet. Believe it, up until he died.
Is that right?
We used to have parties constantly. Cap was a great old guy. He was a...
But he's getting his just reward now.
Oh, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's probably...
Okay, here's another one here. What do we got here now?
Now that's looking from the back toward the altar, of course.
Of the old church?
Of the old church, the one that you saw the photograph of, the one that was built in 1897. You'll notice some lines going across the top. What those are some kind of cables to hold the roof in so it wouldn't collapse. I don't think it was structurally too good of a building. Perhaps that's why they tore it down. And if you'll notice along the side, you can see two of the stained glass windows. And those were, after they were torn down, those stained glass windows were offered to any of the families whose name appeared on there. And they were all taken up, except the one that had St. Gertrude's image on there, and that today is in the lobby of St. Gertrude's Church, along with the cornerstone, sitting on top of the cornerstone that you saw on that second photograph.
Oh, yeah.
That cornerstone, by the way, had an interesting story, too. After the building was torn down, which we'll see a video of a little later on, everything was going in different directions, and nobody wanted anything, and the church didn't want to keep the stone for some reason at that time. So Jeff Ensroff took it. Now, Jeff was a local painter. He worked for the city, and he drew caricatures for Jefferson Beach, Disneyland-like characters around the funhouse and so forth. He lived on Martin Road, and he got a truck and he dragged the thing home, put it in his garden. Stayed there for quite a while, and then Mrs. Ensroff realized that after Jeff had died, that it should go someplace back to the church, and no one at the church wanted it. So she called me as the historical commission member, and I got Hank to get me a truck and a loader, and we loaded the thing up, and I brought it down to the police station. parked it there, and then one day one of the city employees came up to me and said that he heard somebody whispering they're going to haul that thing up to their cottage up north. So I said, oh God. So got Hank again and loaded the thing on the back of my truck, and I took it home and I stuck it in my yard. And I told everyone on the commission, and I told everyone I knew that I had the stone. Well, several years later, helped me, Hank, the priest that did the research on this, he found out that I had the stone anyhow, and he called me, and I said, well, I'm glad it's going back to the church, and that's where it's at now. It's back where it belongs. Good. So it had an interesting trail.
Here's another picture here.
That's the same scene that you just saw, only, of course, looking toward the front doors, and Lake St. Clair would be out through those doors in Jefferson Avenue.
It's the choir upstairs, the organ.
It's interesting to see the way that they're all traditionally, all the churches were the same. Long rows of pews and the altar at the very far end. Today they don't do that now. Today they're all the modern.
Well, I think they had those braces going across there because every time Hank would walk in, those whole walls started to quiver.
Them braces, I believe, were put in when the church was built because it was so big and so wide and there was no structures underneath to hold it.
Oh, I see. No,
they were afraid it was going to go apart. And there's stairs on the outside, too. I don't think it shows them. You'll probably see them later. Them were put in at a later date, probably in the 50s or somewhere down there. But them were big steel rods. Oh, they must have been 1.5 inches, 2 inches. And that was to keep it from falling apart because it was built like this.
I got you.
And there was no braces in it.
Yeah.
The only brace in the church was the front doors and probably the organ section. The choir was up there. Otherwise, it was all open.
Open span, yeah.
Yeah.
What's this now? This is the...
That's the old school, St. Richard's.
Hank's got a story in this, and this is interesting. We're always talking about Blossom Heath. Everybody's concerned about Blossom Heath. If you recall, one of these programs, I mentioned that Blossom Heath at one time originally was owned by a guy by the name of Matt Kramer. Now, Hank, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, well, Matt Kramer gave most of the money to build that church. I mean, to build a school because he wanted the school named after his kid, Matt, who dove in the canal in the rear of the Blossom Heath and broke his neck. But a lot of other people kicked in for the school. I can remember I started there in 1920 when they built it. And my first job before I got in, I was met outside by a Gene Peltier, or Pelkey, like he said. That would be Rob Pelkey's brother. And he said, I got a job for you. So I was small, and he gave me the first job of putting the flag up every day when I came to school. It was my first job. So I had to leave home a little earlier than the rest of the kids because before you went to school, you had to go to church. From church, you come over to the school. Yeah, and the top part of it, or to be the side, the nuns lived up in there, and that wasn't a school for quite a while. I don't think until maybe 7, 8, 9 years till the Sisters of St. Joseph's come in. The first nuns were Dominicans, and they lived up there. And when the Sisters of St. Joseph's come in, they built a convent. We usually call it the nunnery. They built a convent, and the nuns lived over there. I still remember some. I remember most of them. I have one, a very good friend of mine, but I lost track of her. Sister Pauline. She was our coach, baseball coach. And we played ball. Let me see. Millenback and Jefferson, you know where that great big building is? Mm-hmm. That was Doc Sturm's. We used to play in the back of that before Doc Sturm built the building, understand. That was in plowed field.
I'll be darned.
And, I remember most of the players, too, when I was small. But believe it or not, we played Assumption College, numerous of other colleges, and we never lose a game. We never lost them. We used to beat them every time they come over here.
Was that right?
And we were just a bunch of farm kids. We played in overalls and homemade shirts, you know, blue denim shirts. And we used to beat them. But I think why we beat them is because they couldn't run through the plow field like we could. Huh? That's the best thing I could do because I sprained both ankles. Both of my feet are bad from falling down playing ball for school.
Right? She must have been a heck of a coach, Gus.
And that Sister Pauline was our coach. She's a sweetheart. She was up at St. Augustine's in, that would be Richmond. Yeah. And when I got married and I had a kid, my first kid was born, yeah. And my wife and I said, let's go over and see if we can find Sister Paulina. Here she's up here. Now, this is quite a while after we went to school. So we were drinking beer, of course, you know, and we went up there, and I had an old Buick coupe. And I walked in there, and the nun come out and says, can I help you? I says, yeah, I want to see Sister Pauline. She says, can I have your name? I says, no, I want her to name me. She looked at me and started to laugh, because I knew she wouldn't remember me. She come out, oh my God, she was big. And she looked and looked, and she says, nope, can't remember who. I said, Hank Mason. She fell all over me. Oh my God, that was terrible. So she come out to the car to meet my wife. I opened the door and all the beer bottles fall out in the room. She didn't give a darn. That was all right. So I kept in track with her for years. And I'll tell you when I lost her, when Mildred Trombley died, because Mildred used to go see her all the time.
Yeah,
she was one of the first nuns there. She was a sweetheart.
Mildred gave us a lot of pictures for her.
Oh, yes. In fact, that school picture come from Mildred.
Yes, it did. And by the way, Hank didn't mention it, but it was named St. Matthew's for some time, and then after Matt Kramer died, then they changed the name to St. Gertrude.
That's right.
And
was it originally St. Matthew's or what
St.
was
Matthew's, originally.
named after Matt Kramer's kid. And then you had St. Gertrude's Church and St. Matthew's School.
Oh, is that right?
They weren't both named the same. And then after Matt Kramer died, and I don't know if that was in the original contract, but at any rate, they changed it to St. Gertrude's School. Now, that was quite a primitive school, as Hank was saying. I can remember going with my wife in the 50s, and the kids ate down in the basement. That was the lunchroom down there with the furnace pipes and everything. And,
oh, that's right.
And they didn't have any facilities like the public schools, and she was moaning about that all the time. But, you know, of course, her mother wanted her to get an education from a parochial school. But another point, too, that originally St. Gertrude's was called St. Felicity. And it was a mission parish of L'Anse Creuse, part of Sacred Heart over in Roseville. That was the main parish. And they got a Dutchman for a priest over there.
Father Bohm.
Yeah, and he decided he wanted a German saint, so he got St. Gertrude, and he changed it from St. Felicity to St. Gertrude.
They don't know for sure, but
well,
see, the first church was on the lake, where Harrison State Park is right now. Harrison Park is right now. Well, it was about 50 feet this side, and waves and that beat it up. So they moved it down to Ballard Road. You know where Ballard Road is? That's just, right by the spillway, where the hospital is.
Yeah.
They moved it there for a while. And it was named St. Felicity, St. Felicity. How it got its German name, I don't know. But I believe, just like us, it said Father Bohemy must have named it after St. Gertrude, because he was German and she was a German. She belonged to the Benedictine order. She was born in, I believe it was 1255, and she died in 1302.
Did you go to St. Gertrude, Gus?
no, my wife did. I went to St. Gertrude's Church at different times. Originally, our family, that was the only church in town. And then St. Joan of Arc was built in the same year I was built, in 28. And then I attended St. Joan of Arc, and then I moved to the center part of town, and then I was assigned to St. Gertrude's Parish for a while before St. Isaac's was built. And then my wife went to school there, and most of my friends and relatives went there, so one way or another, that just as well been my parish as any other.
Have we gone over all the pictures?
We've gone over all the pictures that we have here with us now. Perhaps we could get into the...
No, you haven't got them all over.
that's for
That's the church.
Yeah, that's for something else.
Okay.
The church was torn down in 1968. We weren't too sure when it was torn down, but I thought it was 1962, but I was wrong. Hank's daughter Peggy was in school at the time, and when you're in the 10th grade in school, you know how old you are and you know what year it was. So she set us straight in that, and it was 1968. And this video will show the tearing down of the church. I don't know, can I talk with the video going or not? Because I want to explain what's going on in there.
Here we go. Go ahead, explain it.
All right, now Hank was taking these pictures, and this was, it was probably in May or June of '68, and this is just prior to its being torn down. And for whatever reason, it was too small and it was too old, and I think it was structurally unsafe, really. And there's the cornerstone that traveled all over the place, and the steeple, Hank's brother Mortz used to paint the cross on top of the steeple, and it was about 200 feet up there, and he said, I guess that's about as close to heaven as I'm ever going to get. But you can see that's quite high. Now, this is probably a couple days before it went down. At any rate...
No, that was the day it went down.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay, I was going to court that day, and I saw all the activity, and I stopped. I got the double later for being late for court, but I figured you're only going to see something like this once in a lifetime. Hank had his little 8mm movie camera, and he was taking a movie of it, and the wrecking bulldozer was out there. They had all the school children out, and they were watching this thing, and I think they were a little bit too close, but they got to see a sight that you don't see every day either. Now you see there, he's breaking down the corners of the church. He's got that roof half collapsed. He went all the way around, broke the walls down, broke the corners down. Now you'll see him, he'll hook a cable through the window in the steeple, and the children are off to the left of your monitor. You can't see them at this point. He put a cable through there, and he started tugging on that thing with that big bulldozer. And the kids were really getting into this. It was like a football game for them. They were saying, go, go, go. And that bulldozer was chugging and pulling and tugging. And those stones weren't... See, there you can see the kids now. Mm-hmm. They're all over the left. And he's pulling away on that thing, and he's finally... you'll see where he gets some of the stones out, but it still doesn't come down. So maybe it wasn't as structurally unsafe as...
Well, look at that bulldozer jump.
Yeah, see, he's dancing with that thing. That's where the kids were hollering, go, and then the stones fell out, and you can see the steeple still hanging up there. So
watch it come down real slow.
Maybe those iron rods that we were talking about, maybe they were holding it together, I don't know. But he goes around the back, and now he's pushing on it. And here's where she comes now. You watch this. Everything was flying in the air, dust and dirt and debris, and I think we saw everything but bats coming out of there. She's starting to come down. It made a tremendous noise. It sounded like thunder when because it all came at once. There it comes. And down it comes, and
there goes the
boom. It looks like smoke, but that's just dust.
I'll be darned.
Accumulated over the years.
That was 68.
1968.
Because I remember that because I moved out here in 64.
And there he's finishing it off, and people were just gathering up whatever pieces they could out of the church. Prior to its being demolished here, they took all the colored stained glass windows out, and they offered them to any of the families whose name appeared on there, except the one for St. Gertrude. And that's still sitting in the vestibule of the church on top of the cornerstone. If you want to go see it, it's in the inner door.
What did they do, go to school, church in the school until that was done?
Yeah, well, the new school was built already.
Yeah.
The new school
they
was
used,
built.
if I'm trying to remember that, because they used the school for a church until the new church was built,
yes.
did they not?
They used the gym, yeah.
Yeah, the gym,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we used it for St. Isaac's too, I think, for a while. There's the rectory, the priest's house. There's the
Now, when that
relatively new
school was
school.
built there, when that was going on, that was what? Father Crowley was there then, was he
Yeah,
not?
that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Father
Crowley
Crowley.
was there.
That was a big piece of history down the tubes.
That's for sure.
Yeah, it was rather nostalgic, but
Well, you have to give way to what their needs were now, but boy, that's really something historical gone from the community when you think of the history behind that church.
yeah, well, it was the only church there. Trinity Episcopal, I think, came later, and Lakeshore
Presbyterian was here, though.
Lakeshore Presbyterian was probably the second
That's a pretty
Protestant
old church, yeah.
Yeah, they're both old.
The first one was a Lutheran church built on Dorian.
Trinity Lutheran?
A Lutheran church that was built on Dorian, right in the back of the block of stores. There was a small church that was built by Bill Reinhardt years ago.
I remember when I first moved to the Shores, St. Gertrude was the parish I was supposed to go to. And I went down and I talked to Father Crowley was there then. I talked to him and I said, I got 6 kids, Father, and I said, I want them all to go to Catholic school. I said, now, my kids came out of St. Ambrose. The guy I bought the house from told me that there was no problem getting the key. His kids went to St. Gertrude, that there was no problem getting the kids in. And so They used to knock on the door and they'd invite you up on the big porch that was there, and then they'd say, you'd walk in and say, well, welcome, and they'd hand you a pack of envelopes for Sunday collection. And I said, what about the kids? He said, well, it might take a year or two to get them in. So I handed them back the envelopes, got in the car, and I drove over to St. Margaret's. And Father Hamill was at St. Margaret's. He started St. Margaret's. And Father Hamill was at St. Ambrose with us. So I went and talked to him, and he said, well, he said, go back and tell Father Crowley that you want to join St. Margaret's, and I'll take the kids in. So I drive back, knock on the porch door, and Father Crowley comes back. Said, you change your mind? I said, no, I'm going to go to St. Margaret's. He said, go ahead. I shot back over and signed up at St. Margaret's. So our kids went to school there.
Yeah, when he showed inside of the church years ago when I was real small, they never passed the basket or give you an envelope. You paid a fee for your pew.
Oh, is that right?
You paid so much a month, so much a year, and your name was right in it. And nobody else better be sitting in there.
I remember when I was a kid that we had a priest, when I was growing up as a kid, that the priest got so upset with the collections that he'd come down and take the collection up. And he'd reach out with that basket, and he held it there till you put something in it.
He'd intimidate you.
I mean,
They used to shake it, too.
but he didn't take no for an answer. You put something in that basket. What do you got there, Gus?
Well, right along with what you're saying, and it's probably a wrong term, but the priest could at that time be intimidating, and that's what he was doing that. I've got a little booklet here that Madeline Reeder gave me. It's a yearbook and financial statement of the Roseville and L'Anse Creuse, and the Reverend John D. O'Shea, pastor.
That's right.
And it's naming some of the locals here. F.G. DeFur, G.A.Z., what would that be, Vernier?
Vernier, yeah.
And A.L. Barton, S. Fazard, R. Mason. Richard Mason, that's
my
your grandfather. And he's got instructions. He's got instructions in here on what you're supposed to do. And one of them just kind of caught me off guard here a little bit. It said, whilst it is a very pious custom to desire the services of one's pastor at the graveside, yet such attention is sometimes inconvenient during the season of poor roads. Sometimes really dangerous when the pastor is obliged by the nearness of the cemetery to start out overheated after wearing heavy vestments from a warm church into cold or damp air. In every case, then, please remember to have a respectable-looking carriage in waiting to take him from the church to the cemetery and back again to the church. Kindly instruct your funeral director or undertaker so to time the march to the cemetery that the priest will be at the graveside when the coffin arrives there. Another thing that is sometimes asked, and is most unreasonably, is to have the coffin opened at the cemetery so that the curious onlookers may have their fill of gazing on the corpse. It is a mark of bad breeding. If they wish to see the corpse and are really sympathizers, they will be in attendance at the corpse house.
That's something.
And, of course, those of us in our older years can remember when a priest said something, you did what they said.
Well, his father O'Shea, don't it say in there you better have a $5 bill ready too?
Probably.
When he leaves the graveyard?
Oh, no doubt.
So he wanted his $5 up
Oh,
front.
he was a strict old bugger. Oh, man.
Well, Father Hayes, I can tell another interesting story about him. He was very strict disciplinarian, very, very strong man, and people would, well, like a young girl, for instance, would come up to communion and have a lot of makeup on, lipstick and rouge and so forth, and he would refuse to give them communion, and they go home and wash your face, and he'd embarrass people.
He refused communion. Tell him to go home and wash all that stuff off and come on back.
Is that right?
That's right.
Very, very, very strict
Father,
man.
he was strict.
Well, one time I went to confession there when I was a teenager. I think it was because I was going with my wife, because at that point I wasn't a member of St. Gertrude's Parish, but on the epistle side of the church, there was the young assistant, and all the kids were all lined up there. And on the other side of the church, the other confessional, Father Hayes was hearing confession. Nobody was over there. So he comes out, and he looks at me, and I was kind of tall, and he said, "You, the tall one, from you on back, over here." "Yes, Father." So we go over there, and I go in there, and I'm whispering, you know, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. My last confession was made a week ago. I have committed the following sin." And I started telling him my sins, and he said, "You did what?" And you could hear him all over the church. He's reverberating. I thought, shh, easy. Anyhow, he gives me all kinds of holy hell and tells me I'm going to hell, and That's the window that from my family that came out of there. I didn't take the top part.
Move your cup there,
too big.
Gus, so we get a good shot of
It
it.
was too big.
The gift of Mr. and Mrs.
Adolf.
Blumlein. Now tell them how you spell
Blumlein.
that, L-E-I-N.
That's spelled properly. Somewhere along the line, our name got spelled L-I-N-E. That's a German name for little flower. Don't I look like a little flower?
You sure do. Well, how old will this be?
Well, the church was built in 1897, so I'm sure it was prior to that the window was made so they could set it in there. And then it stayed in the church. It was on the epistle side up toward the front of the church. And I can remember looking up at that, and I was kind of proud as a kid that was my family name, with the sun shining through there, at morning mass, coming through. It was quite pretty. I have it hanging in my den now.
Well, that's really something.
It's a nice
to be
keepsake.
proud
That
of.
is something.
And I'm sure that everyone else, local families that had donated windows, all have them somewhere in their homes. They were all given to them. And as I said, the one for St. Gertrude is at the church now. They didn't give that one away.
I think it's really great when you can sit back with Hank and yourself and some of the other people and being a longtime resident and talk about the history of a city you grew up in and you were a part of making history out here, Hank. You were.
That's for sure.
You know,
I mean, it is so
Mason
many
name.
things begin there.
Yeah.
My parents belong there. I'll say my grandparents, my parents, all my kids, myself. We all come from that school. They all went through that school. Well, a couple of them had to go to Lakeshore and graduate. I had to go to Lakeshore because they didn't go up to the 12th grade, and they quit and went only to the 8th because there was too many people.
Hank, we're going to have to cut this one off. Our time is running out on this show, so I want to thank you both. We're going to have you back. You're going to be part of our historical series. Gus, I want to thank you, Comcast, and the St. Clair Shores Cable Commission for putting the show on, and we're going to do a lot more on the history of St. Clair Shores. Thank you.
We could probably go on for a month.
Thank you.
Continued story and history of St. Clair Shores. So that's what we're here today to discuss more of the history of St. Clair Shores, guys. So let's start off by, you want to start off by looking at some of the pictures that we have, or Gus?
We had a prior program where we talked about St. Gertrude's Church because it was the original church out in St. Clair Shores, and because it was predominantly a French settlement and predominantly Catholic. And there were so many things that we weren't able to cover in the first session, so we thought we'd like to give it another shot. And eventually, of course, we're going to get all the church on there. You know, we've got 33 churches. And
I know.
I'm not going to get all the saloons on there. There's 33 of them, too. But that's the church as it sits today. That picture was taken a couple days ago by our photographer, Herman Allen. It's an excellent photograph of our
That's the
present
present
day St. Gertrude's Church.
Do we have some more? Hank, you're the guy that, you went to school there.
So
And
I started
obviously-
when it was built.
Yeah. How many people were in that? Was it a fairly big parish back when you were into it, or was it just very few families? It goes back, I know, a long time, but...
Well, the parish extended the whole city.
Mhm.
There was no other churches there when it started, and it took them
Well,
all
how
the way
much of
from...
the city was developed when the church started?
No, but the only developed part of the city would have been that 9-mile road section then. And there was a few stores. No, there was no stores or nothing down the north end. A couple of minor stores, you know what I mean. Pete Labadie was there at Lincoln and Jefferson. He's an old timer. He's been dead a long time. He had the store there. He was a clerk of the township. I remember that real good because
So St. Gertrude, where it now sits, serviced the whole city.
serviced the
As
whole
far as
city.
the Catholic
yes.
population was concerned.
Yeah.
But at the time it was built, The only real development we had was down in the 9 Mile area.
That's very little down to the 9 Mile. That's about all, because it built from Detroit going north, you know.
Well, did we have a lot of the farm areas being farmed?
It was all farm areas, that's
So
all.
the farms were in operation
Yeah.
when the church was built. So many of those attended were farmers.
Yeah, when the farm was built, I still think all the strip farms were here. Because like I said in the first show, I had paper out from 12 to 13. I only had 68 papers to deliver.
Well, weren't you telling me one of your cousins or somebody took turns going to church, and one went one Sunday and one went the other so they could wear the suit? They only had the one suit between them.
No, there must have been somebody else.
Some other one.
But it's possible. Although, remember, they went to church in their overalls too.
Yeah. And of course, they had the
Horse and
steeple
buggies.
there with the bell,
That's
and the
right.
people would walk to church. They hear the bell ring, and they didn't have wristwatches and didn't have clocks on their horses out in the field. So
That's funny too. They had bells them days. They still ring them today at noon, you know, and you get trouble hearing them where you live or where I live. And years ago, you could be up on 13 Mile Road or Masonic or something, and you could hear that just as plain as could be. You could hear them, the bells and the whistles in Mount Clemens on a quiet day.
Is that right?
And at 9 o'clock at night, they rang the curfew in the summer. You could hear that curfew in St. Clair Shores on 12 Mile Road where I live. Get your butt in the house.
Well, they had a curfew at 9 o'clock?
Oh, yes, sir. 9 o'clock, you weren't supposed to be out in the street. Now, whether Mom and Dad was kidding us and that what it was, or what, no, but everybody said that's a curfew, get in the house.
I'll be darned.
there's nothing to do out in the streets.
In the wintertime, I presume it blew earlier, I don't know. You could hear that.
Well, I tell you, the key thing is that there was not a lot of things that they could get into other than being outside or being together. I mean, there wasn't the things today that could get you into trouble like you do today.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was more fun to go to the neighbor's farm a half a mile down the street and steal a few cobs of corn where you could have got it right at the back door of the house. But you had to do something.
Yeah.
And then we played tricks, too, you know.
You want to tell us?
But,
You want to tell us anything about
some of the tricks we played would be forbidden on television. They'd have to beep it out.
Let's not get into
That's
trouble.
for sure. But not as bad as they play today.
Well, they mostly centered around outhouse.
Oh, yeah.
Tricks,
Well, I'll tell you another bad trick. Well, maybe you'll leave it on here. Jefferson Avenue was gravel or blacktop, half and half, huh? And we'd find old tires, and there was old cars that come down there sometime in the middle of the night, and there was a light every half a mile. And you just go in the pasture and you roll it in some cow dung, you know, and you'd put it about 50 feet from a light, you know, put, and the guy'd jump out and grab a tire. He thought somebody lost a tire. Oh, my God. I remember one guy, he got killed in World War II, poor guy, and anyhow, the guy got out of the car, chased him up a tree, beat him up. That was one of the bad tricks we played, you know. Now they want to shoot at you.
I think it would shoot you if you tried that. What do we got here?
Oh, that's Gus's.
Gus?
I knew a lot of them in there too.
No, that's St. Gertrude's Parish. That's the bowling team, right?
That's the bowling team. Yeah, there's a lot of familiar people in there. Very, very familiar.
Sooty Frizard in that one?
Sooty Frizard, Bill Frizard. I can't name them all. Otto Weber.
That isn't all one bowling team, I hope.
That's
Oh,
St.
for the
Gertrude's.
church. The bowling league. For
Bowling
the church.
league, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know when that was taken. It was taken quite a while ago. It was, Lou's got one the same thing next door she's going to give me. But I know most of the people in there.
One of the guys in there, Sooty Frizard, Sooty is a French word for mouse. He was a real little guy.
He was real small.
He was real little. But he had a mouth about twice his size, and he'd go and he'd mouth off to everybody, and he was a real good buddy of Hank. Well, Hank was always 6'4", he's a big son of a gun, you know, and he'd run up to Hank, you know, and Hank would protect him. They'd get fighting, he'd jump on Hank's shoulders, and he'd be up there, and he'd be duking it away. Hank would be taking care of that. Was even in his older years. We'd go to dances and parties, and I'd run across him, and he was always hanging around Hank every time he'd get his mouth, got him in trouble.
What's this here now?
Oh, brother,
Baseball?
there we go. That's St. Gertrude's baseball team in the early 30s. I know just about all of them on there, but right in the back, it's pretty hard to see. You see they had a dance hall back there. It's got a cross on it.
Yeah.
It would be almost to your right picture. The kid right up in the right-hand corner, Paul Labadie, he got knocked down. He was caught by the Japanese, and they beheaded him during the war.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. And then there, my brothers are in there, and on the right, on the bottom, you can hardly see him. It's got is Yale McIntyre, he used to be commissioner out here. And on the left, you can't see him on the bottom, is his brother, Parky. And there's a defer on the bottom. The next to the defer is my brother, Mortz. Then the Laporte. And Bob Mason's at the top. Cliff Mason, you know Cliff.
Oh, yeah.
And then Vittigary, and then my brother Mortz. They were one of the top teams, Catholic teams in the 30s.
Is that the one that Sister Pauline coached?
No, Sister Pauline coached us
Oh, coached you. Okay.
long before that.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that's
in the back
that's in the 30s. That's more recent than.
yeah.
You notice
That
all the
building
names?
in the back, they used to have square dances, and their father, she was there too. And then they had raffles. I remember going home with 2, 3 chickens and a turkey in a bag, and all alive, nothing was cleaned or killed. And they had to sit there all night, or you turn them loose in the backyard. Oh, God, yeah. They had everything in the back.
Who's this now?
That's almost the same crew, only a little later. That's St. Gertrude's football team in the 30s. They took
Look at the helmets they've got there.
They took the state championship that year.
Is that right?
And that's all Masons, Vittigary's, Verniers. Oh, yeah, if you was closer to them, you look at the original picture.
They're all
Actually,
mushrats.
you can nail them off. Vernier was the fire chief out here, and Cliff is in there, was the treasurer.
Right.
There's I got 2 brothers on there.
Where is that picture taken? Right at St. Gertrude's?
That was taken, I don't know if it was on Lake Shore Field or not. We didn't have no football field. We had to play our practice and all that over at Lake Shore.
I see.
Carl Warden was a coach of Lake Shore, and boy, he begged some of them kids to come to Lake Shore so they could play on his team. Yeah, we took the Catholic League that year.
That goes back to the 30s.
Yeah, they were back then.
Warden had a hardware store at 11 Mile and Harper where the Arbor Drug Store is now.
Yeah, he was a coach at Lake Shore too.
Yeah. Nice
Oh,
guy.
darn. It's really something to see those old pictures. And Vernier, I remember him. Of course, he was our fire chief.
Yeah, he was fire chief.
Yeah.
He's on there. He's just a kid. He's just high school.
Isn't that something? And Cliff's
Good.
on there.
Good,
Cliff
good
is on
fire
there,
chief.
yeah.
All during his tenure, St.
My
Clair
brother
Sheriff, the
Bert.
fire department never lost a basement.
Is that right?
That's right.
Never lost a basement. When you were at St. Gertrude and Father Crowley was there, who was the assistant pastor there?
I can't remember. I believe that's the time Father Wagner come in.
And
Father Wagner was a Navy veteran. That's the one we were talking about a little while ago, looking at a picture. He's the one that told me about the kids. Well, the first story he told me was somebody was sending signals from one of the ships, and he was with the duty officer one night. He'd been out watching for this for a long time, sending signals to the submarines, and they caught the kid. It wasn't a kid, it was a grown-up that was working aboard the ship, and he said the duty officer questioned him, tried to stop him, and the guy was wanting to give him trouble, so he said he was about 45 feet from him, and he shot at him, and he hit him in the shoulder, and he says, believe it or not, that bullet knocked him back at least 10 feet, and he fell on his back. Now, the reason he told me that is we were discussing guns because I was a gun collector and also an instructor all during the war. In fact, I just got my NRA appreciation outfit from the NRA for being over 50 years. And then the next time he told me about pulling kids out aboard ship, and he pulled a kid up out of the water that his ship had been bombed or sunk. And later on they got another one, possibly another day or something, and he pulled the same kid up. And the third time he pulled the same kid up, but the kid was in the oil in the water, and the oil was on fire. And he says, I got him up to the top, and this is Father Wagner. He looked at Father Wagner, he says, Jesus Christ, Father, when is this stuff going to stop? He pulled the same kid out 3 times.
Is that right?
In the Pacific, yeah.
Oh, man.
Oh, he was a great guy.
Well, here's a picture here now. What do we got here?
That's Jess Mason. It's my uncle. Oh, God, Cliff's on that. Sister Jane, you know Sister Jane?
The nun?
Yes?
The nun?
Okay.
She's on there. I believe the caption on the picture was what was it, 21 loaves of bread a day or a night or a week?
Well, she got the Catholic Woman of the Year award.
Oh, she got something. Oh, my
She got
God.
22 kids?
I think she had 21 kids.
21, 20.
Is that right?
That was taken right across from where the school is now. The house is still there.
It's good shape, too.
Yeah.
She had 21 kids?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All Catholics.
Frank,
God bless her.
They had a big Catholic picnic table out in the backyard.
Frank's in there too. He was a commissioner here for years before Frank died.
My gosh, 21 kids.
Yeah, Jess Mason and Gertrude.
They must have had their own farm out here to feed them.
Oh, just about. He was caretaker of the graveyard and the school janitor for years. In fact, he got the clock out of the school for me. Great big clock. I got it at home. And he kept it in the garage for a long time so that anytime anybody come by, they'd look at it and he wouldn't say nothing about it. Finally, he gave it to me. He says, you get it. Everybody's used to it. Now they don't even know it's here and they're going to tear all this stuff down anyhow. I got the clock from the school.
When did the cemetery start on 12 Mile Road? How did that start?
1860-something. That was bought for my great-great-grandfather, possibly where you live, where I was telling you you might live on the back of his farm, Joe Chaffine. 1860-something. It was born between the church that was started down and the first one that was built at Burnt Down.
It started there?
Yeah. That was the first cemetery out here, yeah. The only other cemetery I know of is St. Peter's in Mount Clemens that was down the river road near the mouth of the Clinton River.
Now, that old white house on the corner of Elm Grove and 12 Mile is the one you're talking about. That was
Yeah.
on the edge of your farm.
That was, no, at one time my great-grandfather owned that farm from approximately Harper all the way to the lake.
Okay. And what was
And that
that?
was his son that built the store there. That was a store, Fred Champine's store.
What was it, a grocery store or
It
what?
was a grocery store, yep. Or you could get a nip in the basement too, some home brew.
Didn't we
Yeah,
call
if
him,
you know him, you know.
Didn't we call him Picos?
Yeah, they call him Pico, yeah.
Didn't
Uncle
you tell
Fred.
me what they used to have you do when you were a kid?
Well, I worked on a lake. I worked on a lake for most of my life. And anyhow, I used to have to run up there when they were pile driving or building houses or homes on a lake or something and get them a bottle of hooch. So I'd run up 12 Mile Road. Run. And you could buy a beer bottle full of homemade whiskey for 25 cents. They give me 25 cents. I go up there and get the whiskey and bring it down to them, and one or two swigs and it was all gone. You know, and then for 15, 20 minutes later, half hour later, they'd give me another quarter, go get another bottle. So the next crew would drink out of the other bottle. 2 bits. I don't know what it would cost today.
So the farm ran all the way from...
Well, the farms, them days, the strip farms ran from the lake to approximately Harper, maybe a little bit this side.
Mhm.
The reason for that is all these frogs or these muskrats, Frenchmen, had to have a lake because most of them had boats, betos, sailboats, and that was their only means of transportation to Detroit. They transported farm goods,
By boat?
by boat,
Oh, I see.
lumber. They'd go up Mount Clemens and pick up lumber. I have pictures of some of the LaForce's boats through that. And in the wintertime, that was in the summer. In the wintertime, well, they go by wagon on Jefferson, I presume. That's the only road that was there. And there wasn't much of a road, so they told me, because my mother, mentioned to you before, that my mother had, it'd take them a day to get down there, and they'd sell their load, and they'd sell it the next day, and then they'd stay overnight and come home the third day. By boat, well, the old man, he was always gone. He was always sailing, doing something. If he wasn't delivering his own stuff, he was delivering for somebody else. And
They do a lot of hunting down there back in those days. What would they hunt?
no end of hunting ducks.
Ducks?
Ducks. That's a big story. I'm going to St. Gertrude's. I was probably 10 years old. I was going home, and we always carried.
Hang on a minute, Hank. We got another picture.
Oh, that's-
Who's that?
That's Dorothy Lingaman. Carrie Lang, that's my mother's sister. And that's my mother. Next to her in the middle is Agnes Bestie. And next woman would be Laura Lingaman. Then there's Aid Lingaman in there, and my sister, Mary Jane.
Oh, there's Abe right there, eh?
That was the 50th anniversary of St. Gertrude's.
50.
1947. Yeah, I got the book here on it.
Boy, that goes back, too.
Yeah, they were the cooks, and they took care of all the eats and stuff there. My wife was supposed to be in there, but she was doing some cooking there. She was cut, busy in the kitchen.
So the third from the end is your mother?
1, 2, 3. The third from the left, yeah, is my
Right from the
mother.
left is your mother.
Mabel.
Mabel, yeah.
Yeah. Lovely woman.
And then her sister on her left, on her right.
Mm-hmm.
And then her sister-in-law. Then her baby sister is Laura Lingaman, Age's wife.
Well, it's really amazing how all you guys were related,
Yeah.
one way or the other.
Well, you didn't have any place else to go,
Champagnes,
You can follow the Champagnes. I haven't got that deep in the Masons yet. You can follow the Champagnes all over the United States. I got books home on Champagnes that there are different names in that, but a lot of them are still Champagnes. But you ought to see the Champagnes in there. Thousands of them.
is that right?
Yeah, they're all over. During some war they had down east one time, some of them went this way, some went that way, some went this way. You know what I mean? And they all raised families. We've got them even in down in the Bayou country, Louisiana. We've got them, someone way up the Illinois River. I don't know how far they went, but they went.
It's amazing how, yeah, because when you talked about Lingaman, you said that was a relative.
That's
you
right.
talked about the...
Abe married my mother's baby sister, Laura. And when my mother's mother died, well, my ma was one of the older ones. She took care of, raised the kids, helped her raise them.
So it was Abe Lingaman the first village, was that the Lingaman we're talking about?
Yeah, he
Yeah,
was the
that's
village
him.
commission, and he became
He was about the first
city
anything
manager.
out here.
Yeah.
Then he
Yeah.
ended up the last.
Okay, so, and he didn't die that many years ago, did he?
When did he die? I forgot.
It's not too long ago. He's been
10,
around, it
10,
seemed like
12
forever.
years, something like that.
He was back during the Depression. Of course, everybody called him Uncle Abe. He was how you'd compare him to the great grandfather or whatever. But if you needed something, you needed a ton of coal, you were in trouble, you go see Uncle Abe.
What's that pin you got on?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. It's my Kiwanis pin.
Oh, your Kiwanis pin.
Not quite. It's a mushrat pin.
We're going to find you if you don't talk about much about the Kiwanis. So, I mean, that can't be a Kiwanis pin, so we'll get you fined next Tuesday for not talking about
I
Shorewood.
got another one here.
I'll be glad to pay a fine, but you see who's got another one here?
The original muskrats, St. Clair Shearers.
Is that right?
Yeah.
This is a mushrat.
Yep.
You got another one there?
Oh, I
Hank?
believe I have another one here somewhere.
Well, because you've been so good to us mushrats out here
You open it.
presenting our history, Ted, we'd like to make you the first honorary Lebanese mushrat.
Hey, my wife is French. Now, be careful, Gus.
No kidding.
Yeah, my wife is French.
Well, I know a good friend of mine. that's-
Lapointe was her name.
No,
Which
which one does he
Let's
want?
give him the one that ain't broke. We'll fix the
Well,
other
do
one.
you want a coat or tie?
Coat.
Okay, I got the coat.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine, George Sam, his wife is French too. She's Meloche.
Well, the Molosses were. Yeah, I mean, when
Yeah.
you go by, that's why I asked you about the cemetery that's there at on 12 Mile
got
Road,
trouble.
because a lot of the
Yeah, they do
names and the families that you have, yeah, we'll pin it on after. Just
Yeah.
put it here. A lot of the family and the people you're talking about were there. Now, what have you got there, Gus?
Here's an interesting artifact from St. Gertrude that Hank came by. Can you see it?
There we go. Turn it more. That's good.
Getting the reflection in
There you are.
Yeah, they made them at the 50th anniversary of the church, 1947. This one here is brand new. It was, I bought it for my wife, and she used one of the other ones that I bought, and she put this in a drawer, and I just found it here a short while back. She died a few years back. It's got some history of the church on the back.
What's it say on the back, Gus?
Well, it's even, Hank talked before about the priest that took off with the money some years ago. And they even talk about him. It said, in 1897, the cornerstone was laid for the pictured church, and Father Russell served as a traveling pastor. And I don't know what they meant by traveling pastor. The church has been raised to make room for a new church and rectory to serve the present 2,300 families. And it lists the priests, Father O'Shea, Father O'Toole, Father Hayes, Father Crowley, and that was in 52. Yeah. And then we had a Polish priest after that. What was his name? Richard?
Oh, yeah, quite a few of them.
Krasinski and Father Ullman. Father Ullman, I think, was the one that pretty well did the historic research on it.
Father Ullman is the one that did most of this research on it.
There's a good booklet, too, by the way, if anyone in the audience wants to pick it up at St. Gertrude, and I'm sure Father Bryce would be glad to give it to him, or perhaps he could give a little donation, but...
You know, when we speak of the history of St. Clair Shores and some of the stuff that thank God people like Hank and some of them kept some of these historical things around here that we can go back and look at. But there's an awful lot of wealth of information. Gus, I think you ought to bring up a little bit more about a historical group and Madeline Reeder and what those people all do over there, because, you know, I get a tremendous amount of people really interested in what we're doing here today and talking about the old days and the shores and the history of the shores and that. And how can they go over there and view some of this stuff? What should they be doing if they want to get into more of this?
Well, first of all, we have a group called the Friends of the Historical Commission. As you well know, there's 13 members of the commission, and we're appointed by mayor and city council, and we said it's your pleasure. This group, the Friends of the Historical Commission, which I think we're going to change their name in our yearly meeting, which is coming up in the next couple of weeks, they're a support group, and anyone can join this, and it's a small donation of $5 or $7, and with that, they get copies of the Muskrat Tales. Now, for a while, we discontinued them because we used to have a curator, and this is just very time-consuming, and none of us have that much time to expend on it. But now we have a new member of our commission, Jim Alvaro, and he's quite ambitious. And he asked me what I thought might be a good program, and I said, well, I get a lot of questions on the streets, how they were named and for whom they were named and so forth. So he did a tremendous amount of work, and he talked to people like Hank and Harry Krause and a lot of the old-timers out here, and he went through all the records. And that's the feature story in our new issue of Muskrat Tales, which is coming up soon. So if you belong to the Friends of the Historical Commission, this is included in your dues, so you're way ahead just by the copies of that.
Yeah,
alone.
that is a very, very informative booklet that you put out, and it would behoove people to get that so that they get that when it's sent out, because it really does tell a lot. They really dig into the past. They really tell some
great stories, and they're told by different people from different disciplines, and they can go over to the library and see a selection, and we do have them all bound in one issue for someone that wanted them all. It'd be a lot cheaper that way. But if a person wanted a nice Christmas present for someone who used to live in St. Clair Shores, perhaps, or a family member who moved out, you get them some copies of these, and we've covered just about every subject now that we can think of.
Next time we do a show, historical show, I'm going to bring you a picture of when I was a kid. I was about 6 years old, and no, I wasn't even that, maybe 3 or 4, about 4 years old, 4 or 5 years old.
That's historical, too.
That's historical. But when I think that was Depression.
Yeah.
Well,
And I think that there was about 10 or 12 of us kids all standing in the group. And boy, when I looked at what kids talk about today and how poor we really were back in those days.
They don't know what poverty is.
No, great big holes. Here, somebody mailed me a picture about 3 or 4 years ago that they had taken when we were all little kids. And God, I mean, the battered old bib overhauls on, and I mean, holes all over the place. And this was all shreds, no shoes. I mean, things were really tough back in those days.
You didn't have any coins to go up to the store to buy an ice cream.
But you know what? Everybody was in the same boat, so you didn't have any problem. There was nobody to point out to. Well, guys, it's really been informative, and we're going to get, as you say, Gus, we're counting on you and Hank and some of your group to continue to bring these stories forward.
Every member of the commission, by the way, is working on some project, so in the future, you'll see all the rest of our members.
Super. Well, we welcome them, we welcome you, and we thank you very, very much, because it's interesting to me. I enjoy this very, very much.
Did you get a good picture of his muskrat pin? We should get a good close-up of that one.
There's my muskrat pin. I hope I got it sitting right.
Good.
which I thank you gentlemen for. And I want to thank Comcast and the St. Clair Shores Cable Commission for putting this on. And we're looking forward to seeing you very, very soon with another show, Gus. Thank you, Hank, very much.
It's our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hank.